The front door opened before I could say one word. I was standing in my own living room with my 1-year-old daughter on my hip, still wearing my army dress uniform, while my husband's entire family stared at me like I had committed some terrible crime. My husband Daniel had just slapped a DNA test onto the coffee table and said cold as ice, "She's not my child." Then his mother pointed at the door and screamed, "Get out of my house!" That was the moment the front door opened, and the man who stepped inside made every person in that room go silent. But let me back up a little. That morning I had been at Fort Liberty in North Carolina finishing paperwork after a long stretch of training and administrative duty. I was tired in that deep-down military way, the kind of tired that gets into your bones. But I was happy. I was finally going home. My daughter Emma was in daycare near base, and all I could think about was picking her up, kissing her soft little cheeks, and driving back to Raleigh to sleep in my own bed. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Don't be late tonight. Mom has a surprise waiting for you." I stared at the message for a second and smiled. A surprise. After months of cold calls, short replies, and conversations that felt more like duty reports than marriage, I thought maybe Daniel was trying. Maybe his mother, Patricia, had finally decided to welcome me instead of treating my service like some inconvenience. I texted back, "That's sweet, I'll be there by 6. When I picked up Emma, she reached for me with both arms babbling, "Mama, Mama," like she had been waiting all day to tell me everything. I strapped her into her car seat, fixed the little white bow in her hair, and drove home with the windows cracked, smiling almost the entire way. I remember thinking, maybe this is the start of something better. The house looked warm when I pulled into the driveway. Lights on, cars lining the curb, Daniel's truck, his sister's SUV, his uncle's old Cadillac. I laughed softly to myself. Well, Emma girl looks like Grandma Patricia went all out. But when I carried Emma up the steps and opened the front door, the warmth disappeared. The living room was packed. Daniel's relatives sat shoulder to shoulder on the couch in folding chairs even along the wall. No one said hello, no one stood up, no one smiled. Daniel stood near the coffee table. Patricia stood beside him like she was waiting for a verdict. I looked around and said, "What's going on?" Daniel reached down, picked up a white envelope, and threw a paper onto the table. "DNA test results," he said. "She's not my child." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Emma grabbed my collar, confused by the silence. I looked at the paper, then at Daniel. "What are you talking about?" Patricia stepped forward, her face hard. "We know what you did," she said. "You humiliated this family." Then she pointed at the door. "Get out of my house." Before I could say a word, the front door opened behind me. A deep voice said, "Captain Morgan." Everyone turned. Lieutenant General Robert Hayes stepped into the room in full uniform. For several long seconds, nobody moved. General Robert Hayes stood in the doorway wearing his Army service uniform with 3 stars on each shoulder. He wasn't a man who needed to raise his voice to command attention. His presence alone changed the atmosphere. I instinctively straightened my posture, balancing Emma on my hip. "Good evening, sir," I said quietly. He nodded. "At ease, Captain Morgan." His eyes swept across the room. The silence felt almost painful. He noticed the packed living room, the relatives sitting stiffly, Daniel's pale face, Patricia pointing toward the front door, and finally the tears gathering in Emma's bright blue eyes. The general frowned. "I seem to have interrupted something." No one answered. Daniel swallowed hard. "General Hayes, this is a family matter." So I gathered. His calm voice somehow made the room even quieter. The general looked at me. "Captain Morgan, are you all right?" I wanted to answer. I really did. But my throat felt tight. Instead, Emma buried her face against my shoulder and began crying softly. General Hayes took one slow step into the room. "I came here to congratulate one of my finest officers on her exceptional service." His eyes shifted toward Daniel. "I wasn't expecting this." Daniel forced a nervous smile. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding." Patricia quickly jumped in. "General, we're just dealing with some unpleasant family business." He didn't react. Instead, he noticed the paper lying on the coffee table. "May I?" Daniel hesitated before picking it up and handing it over. "It's a DNA report." General Hayes adjusted his reading glasses and carefully scanned the document. Nobody spoke. Even Emma had stopped crying, almost as if she could sense how tense the room had become. After nearly a minute, the general lowered the paper. "Who ordered this test?" Daniel answered immediately. "I did." "And where was it performed?" Daniel named a laboratory I had never heard of. The general looked back down at the report. Then he quietly asked another question. "Was Captain Morgan present when this sample was collected?" Daniel looked uncomfortable. "No." "Was there a court order?" "No." "Was the chain of custody documented?" Daniel blinked. I don't know." The general folded the report neatly. "I've spent over 35 years making decisions based on evidence." He looked around the room. This isn't evidence. Patricia folded her arms. It proves she cheated on my son. General Hayes calmly shook his head. No, ma'am. He placed the paper back onto the coffee table. It proves someone printed a report. The room went silent again. Daniel's uncle cleared his throat. His sister exchanged nervous glances with her husband. For the first time since I'd walked through the front door, I saw uncertainty on a few faces. General Hayes turned toward me. Captain Morgan. Yes, sir. Did you ever consent to a DNA test? No, sir. Were you informed one had been conducted? No, sir. He nodded once. I thought not. Daniel suddenly raised his voice. So what are you saying, she's innocent? I'm saying, the general replied evenly, that accusing someone without verified evidence destroys families. Patricia scoffed. My son deserves the truth. I agree. He paused. Which is exactly why this family needs an accredited laboratory, not assumptions, accusations, or public humiliation. His words landed heavily. I looked around the room. The people who had been staring at me with judgment only minutes earlier now avoided my eyes. General Hayes stepped beside me. Captain Morgan. Sir, I believe you and your daughter should leave here tonight. He looked directly at Daniel. And I strongly suggest no one makes another accusation until the truth is established. As I adjusted Emma against my shoulder and turned toward the door, I realized something had changed. For the first time that evening, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away with someone who believed I deserved justice. General Hayes walked me and Emma all the way to my car. The evening air felt strangely cold even though it was late spring in North Carolina. My hands were shaking so badly that I struggled to buckle Emma into her car seat. General Hayes waited patiently until I closed the back door. Captain Morgan, he said quietly, take a deep breath. I looked at him, and for the first time since walking into that house, the tears came. I don't understand, I whispered. How could they do this? He didn't rush to answer. Instead, he handed me a clean handkerchief from his jacket pocket. I've served in the Army for nearly 4 decades, he said. I've seen careers destroyed because people rushed to conclusions. I've also seen innocent people survive because they refused to stop telling the truth. I never cheated on my husband. I believe you. Those 4 words nearly broke me, not because they solved anything, because they were the first words of trust I'd heard all night. Emma reached through the open car door and wrapped her tiny fingers around my sleeve. Mama, I smiled through my tears. I'm okay, sweetheart. General Hayes glanced toward the house. I'll have someone help you find a safe place to stay tonight. I can stay with my friend Rachel. Rachel Bennett was another Army officer stationed at Fort Liberty. We'd gone through officer candidate school together years earlier and had remained close friends ever since. Good. He reached into his pocket and handed me a business card. On the back he wrote 2 names. One belonged to an experienced military legal assistance attorney. The other was a family law attorney in Raleigh who frequently represented military families. If this becomes a legal matter, he said, don't face it alone. I appreciate that, sir. Before leaving, he looked me in the eyes. One more thing. Yes, sir. Don't try to clear your name by arguing. I frowned. What do you mean? People who have already decided you're guilty rarely change their minds because of louder arguments. He paused. They change their minds when they're confronted with undeniable facts. Those words stayed with me long after he drove away. Rachel welcomed Emma and me into her home without asking a single question. She simply hugged me. Guest room's ready, she said. We'll talk when you're ready. Later that night, after Emma finally fell asleep in a borrowed crib, I sat alone at Rachel's kitchen table. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Daniel. 23 missed calls. 7 voicemails. Dozens of text messages. The first ones were angry. Where did you go? Running away makes you look guilty. Then they became demanding. We need to finish this tonight. Finally, one message caught my attention. Mom says you left too quickly to explain yourself. I stared at the screen. Left too quickly. Patricia had pointed at the front door and screamed for me to leave. Now they were pretending I had walked away voluntarily. Rachel poured me a cup of coffee. What are you thinking? They're already changing the story. She nodded. Then don't give them another chance. The next morning I returned to the house while Daniel was supposedly at work. I only wanted Emma's clothes, some diapers, and a few personal belongings. Patricia wasn't there either. The house was quiet. As I packed a small suitcase upstairs, I noticed Daniel's laptop sitting open on the desk. Its screen had gone dark, but it hadn't locked. I had no intention of snooping. Then a notification appeared. Vanessa. Everything went like we planned. She'll never recover from this. My heart stopped. With trembling hands, I clicked the message. What I read over the next few minutes would change everything I believed about my marriage. For a long moment, I simply stared at the screen. Vanessa. I had never heard that name before. The message sat there like a brick on my chest. Everything went like we planned. She'll never recover from this. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. Every instinct told me to slam the laptop shut and leave. But another voice, the one the Army had spent years training, told me to stay calm, observe and collect facts before making a move. I quietly opened the message thread. The first few texts were harmless enough. Then my stomach dropped. Vanessa, did everyone believe the DNA report? Daniel, every single one of them. Another message. Vanessa, did your mom throw her out? Daniel, exactly like we planned. I stopped breathing for a second. This hadn't been an emotional outburst. It hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been planned. Weeks before I came home, I quickly used my phone to photograph every page of the conversation. There were dozens of messages. Some talked about embarrassing me in front of Daniel's entire family. Others discussed making sure I left the house without asking questions. One message caught my attention immediately. Vanessa, once she's gone, selling the house will be easier. Selling the house. I frowned. Daniel had never mentioned selling our home. Then another message appeared farther down. Daniel, she'll probably just go back to the Army. She won't fight me. The words hurt far more than I expected. After 9 years of marriage, he believed he knew exactly how I would react. I took more photographs. Then I noticed another folder on the desktop labeled taxes. I almost ignored it. Almost? Inside were several PDF files and recent bank statements. One transfer immediately stood out. $18,500. Transferred from our joint savings account. 3 weeks earlier, I opened another statement. Another transfer. $12,000? Then another. Almost $40,000 had quietly disappeared while I was serving my country. I whispered to myself, "What have you done, Daniel?" A car door slammed outside. I froze. Looking through the upstairs window, I saw Patricia pulling into the driveway. She wasn't supposed to be home. I quickly emailed the photographs from my phone to my private email account, logged out of the laptop, and closed it exactly the way I'd found it. Then I grabbed Emma's diaper bag and hurried downstairs. Patricia walked through the front door just as I reached the hallway. Her expression immediately hardened. "I thought I told you to stay away? I'm only here for Emma's things." She crossed her arms. "You've already destroyed enough." I looked at her calmly. "I didn't destroy this family." She laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that?" "No." I lifted Emma into my arms. "I expect the truth to speak for itself." Without another word, I walked past her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Outside, I buckled Emma into her car seat and drove straight to the office listed on the business card General Hayes had given me. Attorney Melissa Carter welcomed me into her office that afternoon. She listened carefully as I described everything that had happened. When I finished, I handed her my phone. She slowly scrolled through every photograph. Her eyebrows rose. Finally, she looked up. "Captain Morgan." "Yes, I've handled military family cases for 22 years. She tapped one of the screenshots. "I believe your husband didn't just try to humiliate you." She opened a legal folder. "I believe he planned to defraud you." The room suddenly felt very quiet. I realized this was no longer just about a fake DNA test. It was becoming something much bigger. And Daniel had no idea his own messages had just become the strongest evidence against him. I walked out of Melissa Carter's office carrying a folder that suddenly felt heavier than anything I'd ever hauled through Army training. Not because of its weight, because of what it represented. Evidence. Real evidence. For the first time since that terrible night, I wasn't relying on my emotions. I had facts. Melissa had asked me to remain calm. "Captain Morgan," she said before I left, "from this point forward, don't confront your husband. Don't warn him. Let him believe his plan is working." That wasn't easy. Every part of me wanted to drive straight home and demand an explanation. Instead, I followed her advice. Back at Rachel's house, Emma was sitting on the living room rug, happily stacking colorful plastic blocks. She looked up, saw me, and laughed as if nothing in the world had changed. I picked her up and kissed her forehead. "You deserve better than this," I whispered. Rachel noticed the look on my face. "What did the lawyer say?" I handed her the folder. She skimmed through the paperwork before looking up. "Oh, Claire." "It gets worse." I showed her the screenshots from Daniel's laptop. She read them slowly. By the time she reached the message about selling the house, she closed her eyes. "I can't believe he actually wrote this." "I can." The words surprised even me. Somewhere deep inside, I realized I had been making excuses for Daniel for years. Every forgotten anniversary, every missed birthday, every time he complained about my military career, every time Patricia blamed me for putting the Army before family, I'd always believed things would get better. Instead, they had been getting worse while I refused to see it. The following morning, Melissa called. "I've started tracing the financial records." "What did you find?" "The money wasn't spent." "It wasn't—" "No." She paused. "It was moved." Daniel had opened another bank account nearly 8 months earlier. One I knew nothing about. Most of the money from our joint savings account had been quietly transferred there in small amounts. Melissa explained why. People often move money little by little because they hope it won't be noticed. How much are we talking about? Just under $42,000. I sat in silence. That wasn't just our savings. That was Emma's future. The down payment we'd planned for a larger home. The emergency fund we'd spent years building together. I also found something else. What? A consultation invoice. From who? A divorce attorney. The consultation had taken place almost a month before I returned from Fort Liberty. My heart sank. Daniel hadn't made a terrible decision in one emotional evening. He had been preparing for this while I was still serving my country. Melissa continued. And Claire? Yes. The DNA laboratory listed on that report. I waited. It doesn't appear to be accredited. What does that mean? It means the report would likely carry little or no weight in court. So, it may not even be legitimate. I leaned back in my chair. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Daniel hadn't simply believed a fake report. He had chosen to use one. That afternoon, another unexpected call came. General Hayes. Captain Morgan. Good afternoon, sir. I wanted to check on you and Emma. We're safe. I'm glad. He paused before continuing. I've spoken with military legal assistance. So have I. Good. Then his voice became more serious. I need you to remember something. Yes, sir. Your husband wanted you to react emotionally. I know. Don't give him that victory. After we hung up, I looked out Rachel's kitchen window. Emma was chasing Bubbles across the backyard while Rachel laughed beside her. For the first time in days, I didn't feel broken. I felt focused. Daniel thought he had already won. He had no idea that every lie he told was becoming another piece of evidence waiting for him in court. The court-approved DNA test was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Melissa insisted that everything be handled through an accredited laboratory approved by the county court. No shortcuts, she reminded me. If the truth is on your side, let the process protect it. Daniel arrived 20 minutes late. He barely looked at me. Patricia followed him into the waiting room, carrying herself with the same confidence she'd worn the night she threw me out of the house. Emma sat quietly on my lap, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. She had no idea why so many adults suddenly seemed angry. Melissa leaned over and whispered, "No matter what happens today, stay calm." I nodded. I will. The DNA collection itself took less than 15 minutes. A technician gently swabbed the inside of Emma's cheek. Then Daniel's, finally mine. Everything was documented. Every sample was sealed. Every signature was witnessed. Exactly the way General Hayes had said real evidence should be handled. As we walked toward the parking lot, Daniel finally spoke. "You really think this is going to change anything?" I looked at him. "I think the truth already has." He laughed without humor. "You've always been good at pretending." I didn't answer. Melissa had warned me. Every unnecessary argument only gave him another opportunity to twist my words. So I simply buckled Emma into her car seat and drove away. 3 days later, Melissa called. "The results are in." My stomach tightened. "Can I come to your office?" "Please do." I arrived less than an hour later. Melissa placed a sealed envelope on her desk. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she looked me straight in the eyes. "Claire, are you ready?" I nodded. She carefully unfolded the report. Then she smiled. "The probability of paternity is 99.9999%. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Not because I had doubted Emma. I never had. I cried because the truth had finally been put into words no one could argue with. Melissa handed me a tissue. "Congratulations." I laughed through my tears. "That's a strange thing to say after everything that's happened." "It isn't." She tapped the report. Today, the truth officially replaced the lie. That afternoon, Daniel received the same results. His response surprised everyone. He didn't apologize. He didn't call to ask how Emma was. Instead, he sent one short text. The lab must have made a mistake. Melissa read the message and shook her head. When someone refuses to accept evidence, they're no longer searching for the truth. She was right. The next morning, Daniel called 6 times. I didn't answer. Then Patricia left a voicemail. "Claire, we need to talk." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't concern for Emma. It was panic. By then, several relatives who had attended the so-called welcome home dinner had learned about the official DNA results. Daniel's younger sister Emily was the first to reach out. "Claire," she said quietly over the phone, "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything. I sat there and watched everyone accuse you." Her voice cracked. "I should have stood up for you." I closed my eyes. "I appreciate you calling." "There was something else." "What?" "The night you left." She hesitated. "I saw Daniel throw another envelope into the fireplace." My heart skipped. "What kind of envelope?" "I don't know." But after hearing about the real DNA test, she took a deep breath. I think whatever was inside would have proven he was lying from the beginning. After we hung up, I stared out the window. Daniel wasn't fighting to save our marriage. He was fighting to save the lie he had built. And with every passing day, that lie was falling apart. By the end of that week, the story had spread through Daniel's family. Not because I told anyone, because the official DNA results spoke for themselves. People who had watched me walk out of that living room carrying Emma suddenly realized they had witnessed something very different from what they'd believed. They hadn't seen a guilty woman exposed. They had watched an innocent wife be publicly humiliated. One by one, the phone calls began. Daniel's aunt called first. "Claire, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." "No," she replied softly. "I do." She apologized for sitting silently that night. Then his cousin called. Then another uncle. Each conversation sounded almost the same. "We should have asked questions. We shouldn't have judged you. We're sorry." I appreciated every apology, but none of them erased that night. The image of Emma clinging to my uniform while strangers stared at us would stay with me forever. A few days later, Melissa called again. "I've received another piece of discovery." "What is it?" "Financial records." I drove straight to her office. She handed me several documents. "This account belongs to Daniel." I recognized the account number immediately. It was the secret account where he had transferred our savings. Melissa pointed to another series of transactions. "Look at the recipient." The name froze me. Vanessa Collins. Multiple payments. $5,000. $3,000. $7,000. Almost $20,000 altogether. I looked up. He was giving our money to her? Melissa nodded. "It appears so." Then she slid another document across the desk. This came from a subpoena to his phone records. I read the summary. Hundreds of phone calls, late-night conversations, weekend hotel reservations, credit card charges from restaurants Daniel had claimed he'd visited for work. I closed the folder. I don't think I even knew my husband anymore. Melissa sighed. "Unfortunately, there's one more thing." She handed me printed screenshots. Vanessa had voluntarily turned over several text conversations after receiving legal notice. I recognized the messages immediately. But these weren't the ones I'd photographed. These were newer. One text from Daniel read, "Don't worry, once the divorce is final, everything will be ours." Another, "She'll never figure out the DNA report wasn't real." I stared at the words. There it was. Not suspicion. Not confusion. Not jealousy. A confession. Daniel had known the report was fake from the beginning. Melissa quietly closed the folder. "I believe this changes everything." Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. The caller ID surprised me. Vanessa Collins. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered. "Hello." Her voice sounded nothing like I expected. She sounded tired, almost frightened. "Claire, I know you probably hate me." I didn't answer. She continued. "I didn't know he was still living as your husband." "What?" "He told me you were already separated." I closed my eyes. "He said you only stayed married because of military benefits." Every sentence felt like another punch. Vanessa's voice cracked. "When I learned the truth, I ended things. You helped him humiliate me." "I know." She began crying. "And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "I've already given your attorney everything I have." "Why?" "Because Emma deserves better than the lies we helped create." After we hung up, I sat quietly in Rachel's backyard, watching Emma chase butterflies through the grass. Children had a beautiful way of living only in the present. No resentment. No revenge. Just joy. Looking at my daughter, I realized something important. This fight had never really been about proving I was innocent. It was about making sure Emma grew up knowing that truth matters, even when lies seem louder. The divorce hearing was scheduled for the second week of September. By then, nearly 4 months had passed since the night Daniel and his family had tried to throw me out of the house. I walked into the Wake County Courthouse wearing a navy blue business suit instead of my Army uniform. Melissa had given me one simple piece of advice. "Today you're not here as a soldier. What am I here as? A mother." Those words stayed with me as I carried Emma into the courthouse. Rachel watched her in the waiting area while Melissa and I entered the courtroom. Daniel was already there. He looked different. He lost weight. The confidence he'd worn during that so-called welcome home dinner had disappeared. Patricia sat behind him, avoiding my eyes for the first time. When the judge entered, everyone stood. After opening statements, Melissa calmly presented our evidence. The official DNA report. The bank records showing Daniel's hidden account. The transfers to Vanessa. The text messages discussing the fake DNA report. The screenshots proving the confrontation had been planned before I even came home from Fort Liberty. Not once did Melissa raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Daniel's attorney attempted to argue that his client had acted out of genuine concern. The judge looked over the documents for several quiet moments. Then he asked Daniel one question. Did you know this DNA report had not been verified by an accredited laboratory? Daniel hesitated. I wasn't sure. Melissa immediately handed the judge another exhibit. One of Daniel's own text messages. She'll never figure out the DNA report wasn't real. The courtroom became completely silent. The judge adjusted his glasses. Mr. Morgan... His voice was calm but firm. This message suggests you knew exactly what you were doing. Daniel lowered his head. His attorney didn't ask another question. Next came the issue of custody. The judge reviewed Emma's medical records, daycare reports, my military service schedule, and statements from neighbors Rachel and even General Hayes. General Hayes wasn't present in court that morning. Instead, he had submitted a written character reference. The judge read part of it aloud. Captain Claire Morgan has consistently demonstrated honesty, integrity, and exceptional judgment throughout her military career. I trust her completely as an officer and as a parent. Hearing those words nearly brought tears to my eyes, not because they praised me, because someone had taken the time to defend my character when it mattered most. The hearing lasted nearly 4 hours. Finally, the judge announced his decision. Primary physical custody of Emma would remain with me. Daniel would receive supervised visitation until he completed parenting and family counseling. The hidden money transferred from our joint savings account would be returned to the marital estate. The court also ordered Daniel to reimburse my legal expenses related to the fraudulent DNA claim. When the hearing ended, Daniel slowly approached me outside the courtroom. For a moment, I thought he might finally apologize. Instead, he quietly asked, "Do you really think you won?" I looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in her stroller, then back at him. This was never about winning. I paused. It was about protecting our daughter from the consequences of your choices. Without another word, I turned and walked away. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like someone seeking revenge. I felt like a mother who had finally found justice. Almost 6 months passed before I saw Patricia again. Life had finally begun to settle into something that resembled peace. Emma was growing fast. She had started putting little sentences together, and every morning she insisted on helping me make breakfast, even if helping usually meant dropping blueberries on the kitchen floor. I had returned to full duty at Fort Liberty, balancing motherhood and my Army career one careful day at a time. For the first time in years, coming home felt safe. Then one quiet Saturday afternoon, someone knocked on Rachel's front door. Rachel glanced through the window. "Claire." Her voice sounded surprised. "I think you'd better see this." I walked over. Standing on the front porch was Patricia. She looked older. Not just older. Smaller somehow. The confident woman who had ordered me out of her house had disappeared. In her place stood an 80-year-old widow holding a small white gift bag. Rachel looked at me. "You want me to send her away?" I thought about it. A few months earlier, I probably would have. Instead, I quietly nodded. "I'll talk to her." I stepped outside and gently closed the front door behind me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Patricia broke the silence. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I folded my arms. "Then why are you here?" She looked down at the gift bag in her hands. "I've replayed that night in my head every single day." Her voice trembled. "I keep hearing myself yelling at you." I didn't answer. "I watched you standing there with Emma." She wiped away a tear. "And I never once asked if my own son was telling the truth." The words hung between us. They were the first honest thing I had ever heard Patricia say about that night. "I believed him," she whispered. "I know. I wanted to protect my family." I looked at her calmly. "You already had one." She closed her eyes. For a moment she couldn't speak. When she finally looked up, her face was wet with tears. "I failed you." I didn't know what to say. Because she was right. She had. Patricia slowly handed me the gift bag. These belonged to Daniel's grandmother. Inside was a tiny hand-knitted baby blanket. Cream-colored. Perfectly preserved. "My mother made it when Daniel was born." She smiled sadly. "I think Emma should have it." I carefully folded the blanket back into the bag. "Thank you." Patricia nodded. Then she took a deep breath. "There was another reason I came. I waited. I'd like the chance..." She paused. "To know my granddaughter." For the first time, she didn't call Emma that child. She called her granddaughter. It was a small difference, but it mattered. "I can't pretend none of this happened," I said gently. "I know. You accused me in front of your entire family. I know. You tried to throw us out. I know." She never argued. She never made excuses. She simply accepted every word. "I can't promise things will ever be the way they were." I wouldn't ask that, but I also won't teach Emma to carry hatred. Patricia's eyes filled with tears again. "So," I took a slow breath, "we'll start with short visits." She covered her mouth. "You mean that..." I mean, we'll take one step at a time. She quietly nodded. That's more kindness than I deserve. As she walked back to her car, I stood on the porch watching her leave. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't forgetting. It wasn't pretending the pain never happened. It was choosing not to let that pain become Emma's inheritance. And somehow, that choice felt stronger than any revenge I could have imagined. 1 year later, my life looked nothing like it had the night I walked into that so-called welcome home dinner. In many ways, it looked better than I had ever imagined. Emma was almost 2.5 years old now. Every morning she raced through the house with the same stuffed bunny she'd clutched during those difficult weeks. She filled every room with laughter, reminding me that children have an incredible gift. They don't measure life by its worst moments. They measure it by love. I had accepted a promotion to major and continued serving at Fort Liberty. The promotion wasn't just another rank on my uniform. It represented every early morning, every deployment, every sacrifice, and every moment I had refused to let someone else's lies define who I was. General Hayes pinned my new rank during a small ceremony attended by fellow officers Rachel and Emma. Afterward, he shook my hand. "I'm proud of the officer you've become," he said. Then he smiled at Emma. "And even prouder of the mother." Those words meant more to me than any medal I'd ever received. Rachel laughed. "I told you a year ago you'd get through this." "You did. I just wish you'd believed me." "I do now." Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. Daniel completed the counseling required by the court. Over time, his supervised visits gradually became more natural, and he began rebuilding a relationship with Emma. Our conversations remained brief and focused entirely on our daughter. The anger that once lived between us slowly faded, not because the past disappeared, but because Emma deserved parents who could put her needs before their pride. Patricia also kept her promise. She never pushed for forgiveness. She earned trust one visit at a time. Sometimes she came over just to read Emma a story or bring homemade cookies. One afternoon, I found the two of them sitting on the living room floor wrapping Emma's favorite doll in the little knitted blanket Patricia had given us months earlier. Emma looked up and smiled. "Grandma made baby cozy." Patricia looked at me with tears in her eyes. I simply smiled back. That was enough. Not every relationship can be restored. Some wounds leave permanent scars. But scars don't always represent weakness. Sometimes they remind us how much we've survived. Looking back, I realized something important. The greatest victory wasn't proving the DNA report was fake. It wasn't winning in court. It wasn't recovering the money Daniel had hidden. It wasn't even hearing the apologies. The greatest victory was refusing to become bitter. Because bitterness would have stolen something the lies never could. My peace. Today, when people ask me how I survived the hardest season of my life, I give them the same answer. The truth didn't save me overnight. It saved me one honest decision at a time. If my story has taught you anything, I hope it's this. Never rush to judge someone based on accusations alone. Truth deserves patience, and people deserve the chance to be heard. The strongest form of revenge isn't cruelty, it's living with integrity when others expect you to break. Protect the people you love, cherish your family, and never let anger become the legacy you leave behind. And if this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone who needed a second chance, I'd be honored if you shared it with them. Feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences, and if you'd like to hear more stories about courage, justice, and hope, I'd love for you to subscribe and join me again. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves and of the people you love. The end.